Ladies and gentlemen, my name is David Brooks. Thank you very much. And I wrote a book, and its title is Foresthill, a public defender's bedtime reader. And I wrote that book because I needed to write some bedtime stories for some motorcycle enthusiast friends of mine. So, I'm going to read a few here. I had a couple of requests. I'm going to work those in too. One of the cases happened up here at Wharton's Market. As you're well aware, Wharton's is the grocery store with the world's best view. They're on the edge of the world. And we had a case happen there a long time ago, and I had occasion to write that up. And it's called Cop Crusher. Hi, kids. Tonight, here's a bedtime story from my favorite town, Foresthill. Foresthill is a town in the Sierra Mountains, a long distance from much of anything. It has been there since the gold rush. Because of the way it is isolated, it is a place that is unlike any other. It is my good fortune to be Foresthill's public defender. By way of introduction, in Foresthill, you don't own a dog, you probably own a wolf. You don't own a gun, you own firepower. You don't grow weed, you grow sticky bud. Crank only comes in crystal and never overcut powder. Foresthill is a town of both quality and superlatives. So you don't own a truck, you own a jack-up lifted 4x4 with a huge motor and tires so big you need a ladder to get into the cab. In Foresthill, real men are known by their badass trucks. There's a grocery store in Foresthill called the Grocery Store. Things are straightforward there, and they don't need no fancy city ways. It's on the one main road near the bar and the gas station. Last night, Bob, who owns the grocery store, called the local cop. Bob had noticed that a badass huge truck had been parked outside his store for hours, and the engine was running. It appeared that someone was in the cab. The brake lights and the backup lights were on. It was time for Bob to go home, but as the owner of one of the 3 local businesses worth robbing, he was nervous and asked that the truck be checked out. The resident officer who showed up was a pretty new hire not long out of the police academy. He'd been a good student, though. He knew the drill. He pulled up behind the truck, carefully blocking it with his car's crash bar, and he got on the patrol car's loudspeaker. "Come out of the truck and talk to me." "Nothing." "This looks suspicious. What are you doing?" No reply. The young officer really had no choice. He hauled himself up to the driver's side window, standing on a chrome step. The driver seemed unconscious. The officer drew his stick and knocked on the window. It was just Greg in that truck, but the young officer didn't know that. Everyone in town knew that Greg was narcoleptic. He'd fall asleep in church. Well, I guess that isn't so unusual. He'd fall asleep at work. Well, again, I guess that isn't so uncommon. He'd snooze if he got bored. Wait a minute, I do that. Come to think of it, maybe there's nothing wrong with Greg at all, but he does sleep a lot. When the officer smacked on the window, Greg awoke, startled and disoriented. While Greg was trying to get his bearings and figure out why he was getting yelled at, he took his foot off the brake, and then when the truck lurched backwards, he slammed his foot down on the accelerator pedal. Now, this sort of thing happens all the time. That's why the police officers trained the block with the crash bar on the front of his car. However, at the academy, they didn't take badass jacked up redneck 4x4s into account. It was just like going downtown to see the monster trucks at the sports arena. The truck simply backed up over the police car. Well, to that officer, I expect it didn't feel so simple. It's tough to hang on under those circumstances, and it looks like a longer drop than it really is when you're in the process of launching over your very own police car. Heck, even though it was a standing start, Greg even got a little hang time. Once they'd landed, the young officer used his baton to really give the window a good shot, shattering it all over Greg. Greg, still not fully aware of what was happening, screamed and pushed his foot to the floor. The young officer, feeling the launch and seeing his crushed patrol car, screamed too. It could have been worse. When the truck rocketed in reverse through the small parking lot, crossed the road, and hurtled off the embankment into the abyss, it looked bad. Fortunately, an old pine tree blocked the way to oblivion. The two men in the truck were left teetering in space. It was but a matter of a minute for another badass truck with a winch, not to be confused with a badass truck with a wench, that's a different story, to haul them to safety. Greg was taken to jail if for no other reason than for the officer to save face. The young officer had to do something after he'd let everyone in town know he screams like a little girl. It might have been worth it for Greg, though. There are a lot of badass trucks in Foresthill, but he has the only one that says Cop Crusher on the door. Fame, after all, has its price. Actually, the door says Cop Crutcher, but if you see Greg, don't spoil it and tell him he can't spell. He's really enjoying his 5 minutes of fame. Good night, kids. I've got the light. Thank you very much.